over $100 billion. That's Russia's budget deficit for 2025, and it's only growing each year. Ugh, that's a drop in a bucket. Have you seen the US national debt? National debt, not budget deficit. Two different things. The US deficit is nowhere near as big as the debt, but in fact, both are at historic highs right now. Interesting, isn't it?
We're gonna win so much, you may even get tired of winning!
But even so, those numbers are tens of times larger than what we see in Russia. Where's the catch? Once again, two different economies, two different things. Deficit is hardly a problem for the US. They print their own money, which just so happens to be the world's reserve currency, and they can do so almost without any limits. Spend it on any kind of trade and any kind of war. I mean, anti-terrorism operations. Deficit wasn't a problem for the Russian state either, but for a different reason. It simply didn't spend too much. So, seeing it grow like this is something it's facing for the first time since the early 2000s. New deficits need new money. And now you're about to see just how elegant of a way the Russian authorities found to pick the pockets of their citizens. And these guys are going to help them out. What are they? Well, I suppose those with a few vices in the UK or Canada have already guessed. Excise stamps for various unhealthy products, mostly for cigarettes and alcohol. Essentially, this little stamp means that by buying these products, you are paying extra for your sins. The logic is as simple as it gets. Want to consciously harm your health? Go ahead, but consciously pay a symbolic fee for it. But harm to health is a broad concept. In a way, any product can be harmful. The dose makes the poison. So if you really want to and put some thought into it, you can slap a sin tax on almost anything. And in Russia, they decided to tax sugar. In this episode, you'll find out how the Russian state decided to cash in on its citizens' sins. How 3 lines in a massive document can shift a multi-billion-dollar market. And why raising taxes isn't always a way for the state to find free money. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We're just starting our new journey to find our audience, and we'd be very glad to see you among the first subscribers of our new channel. But only if you're going to watch. We're only interested in serious relationships here. Russia is an extremely progressive country. What the hell are you talking about? Well, alright, maybe not in every sense. Okay, probably not even in most. It progressed a lot in finding ways to squeeze money out of its citizens, that's for sure. From an ethical standpoint, an excise tax is usually seen as either tax on luxury or on harmful habits. Armed with that logic, Russia introduced the so-called sweet excise back in 2023. So, in this way, Russia was years ahead of international trends. The WHO only began to call for such measures in early 2026. The Russian law didn't actually tax everything sweet. It applied exclusively to non-alcoholic drinks containing sugar, syrup, or honey, where the carbohydrate content exceeds 5 grams per 100 milliliters. This definition covers just about any sweet soda, and it's hard to argue that the stuff isn't bad for you. Everything else with sugar, juice, vitamin drinks, even milk, it's also naturally pretty sweet, was excluded. As for alcohol, Russia has had a separate excise tax for years, with a stamp required on every bottle sold in the country. So, an average Russian citizen now pays an extra 9 cents per liter of every bought, totally authentic Coca-Cola, TM. And everybody just agreed to pay extra for drinks like that. Well, the best part about excise tax is no new lines on a check at a checkout. The tax is already baked into the price. Manufacturers and importers handle the payments, essentially handing over 9 cents for every litre of Coke directly to the federal budget. And that is the key takeaway here. Excises are a perfect way to quietly pad the budget, the one with the $100 billion deficit. The plan was to rake in about $310 million from the new excise back in 2023. So, what happens next? Well, even in Russia, you can't just come out and say, "We need money for the war, so we're going to look for it everywhere, even in your drink." So officially, all the money collected is meant for the fight against diabetes. In practice, no special diabetes relief fund exists. The new cola dollars go straight into the melting pot of the federal budget, and then definitely towards national healthcare. Oh, you can believe them. The scheme is clever, and right here we could have wrapped up today's episode exposing how easy it is to make money off excises. But lately, Russia's legislation printer has been going brrrr with new laws. And that information is already out of date. Take a look at how just a few lines of legalese can pull the rug out from under an entire market. In late October 2024, Duma passed a whole tome of tax code changes. Among hundreds upon hundreds of tweaks, it took only 3 tiny lines to fundamentally break the market. Adding just one word, transportation, changed everything regarding packaging. You see, at first, the law used to cover just regular or online store purchases. This small change now made the excise tax apply to sugar drinks delivered in kegs, canisters, and any bulk containers. Now, every litre of lemonade delivered in a barrel is taxed. This means prices haven't just gone up for regular people, but for restaurants, food courts, and catering companies too. Taxing individuals is petty. The real jackpot is squeezing the big business. Changes also scrapped the exemption for sugar drinks with healthy vitamins added to them. And finally, they went after the most sacred, a traditional Russian and Slavic fermented bread drink called kvass. Before the amendment, it was intentionally kept off the harmful drinks list. What did kvass ever do to deserve this? Who knows? Maybe it's a sudden wave of patriotism, a growing health trend, or simply because other sodas got too expensive.
Wow, that seems like a lot.
But kvass was becoming incredibly popular in Russia. The trend is evident. Over the last 5 years, consumption jumped by a quarter, and in dollar terms, it doubled. Production is closing in on 1 billion liters. In other words, the money became too serious for the authorities to leave the exception in. Beyond just expanding who pays, they also cranked up the rate. Remember, it started in 2023 at 9 cents a litre. 2 years later, along with the longer list of taxable goods, the rate hit 12 cents. Now in 2026, it's been hiked again to 14 cents, nearly doubling the original tax. It's surprising just how fast the Russian authorities move when they want to. In just 4 years, they introduced a brand new tax, rewrote the rules, and hiked the rate twice. And it worked. They managed to make, or rather take, some decent money. This tax brought in $100 million for the partial year of 2023. It was slightly under target, but thanks to the expanded rules and higher rates, they caught up fast. For the full year of 2024, they collected nearly $240 million. And by the end of 2025, the soda tax haul reached $320 million. Mission accomplished. In fact, if you look at the actual budget assessments rather than just the headlines, they've actually over-delivered. If you're watching this from the US, Germany, the UK, France, or other Western countries, then to Russia you're a resident of an unfriendly state. And that, by the way, is an official list, publicly declared by the Russian authorities. Take that, add Donald Trump's favorite tactic, multiply it by a bottle of wine, and there you have it. Another nice way to help the budget while making life a bit harder for your own citizens. Don't worry, it'll all make sense in a second. Let's deal with the wine first. For years, finding a good bottle of European wine would only cost you $6 or $7. That ship has long sailed. Excises on wine were raised every year by a negligible amount, 1–2 cents per bottle, right up to 2023 as they reached 42 cents. Everyone assumed 2024 would follow suit. And the year did start that way, with a raise to 43 cents. But the radical tax overhaul hit out of nowhere. Wine excises tripled overnight, and 43-cent rate turned into nearly $1.50 per litre. This means a standard 750 milliliter bottle of wine got a whole $1 more expensive instantly just because of the tax. After that turning point, the days of 2-cent annual raises were over. In 2025, the excise jumped by 6 cents in one go, and in 2026, another 6 cents on top of that. The wine situation is a fascinating, multi-layered mess, and excises is only the tip of an iceberg. To get the full picture, we need to look at one of the most talked about figures of our time, and certainly the most flamboyant and unpredictable president.
I gotta look at this myself. Wow, what a view.
Agent Krasnov. For many, he's synonymous with one word.
Tariffs. My favorite word, tariff.
But tariffs are nothing new. Used by everyone, they're just a symptom of turbulent times. Russia is no exception. Not long ago, a new regulation set custom duties for specific nations. If you flip through it, you'll see it was drafted specifically for those unfriendly countries. Goods from them carry extra duties. But our channel is completely duty-free. So send, export, and share this video with your friends and help us grow so we can keep making even better content for you. Thanks. Also, just to be clear, duties and excises are not the same thing. Import duties are like a cover charge. Your product wants to enter the country? Pay up. There are plenty of examples of import excises, sure, but excise is more of a sin or a luxury tax collected at the border. Alright, anyway, for brevity's sake, duties aren't excises. They're, well... Before getting onto a list of naughty or unfriendly countries in 2022, as Russia calls it, tariffs on European wine were around 12.5%. But the list wasn't meant to be a piece of paper, it's a real legal tool. A tool that a year later they put to work. Unfriendly countries were hit with an increase to 20%. Originally, it was pitched as a temporary measure, but as we know, nothing is more permanent than a temporary tax. A year later, on August 10, 2024, they hiked it again, this time to 25%. In the end, your go-to bottle from France, Italy, or Spain gets hit with a double whammy. Duties have doubled and excises have tripled. If you do the math, it looks something like this. Take a decent bottle of Spanish wine with an export price of €5. Back in the day, add a 12.5% duty and a 40-cent excise, and a Russian shopper in Moscow would pay about €6 for it. Fast forward to now, and duty on top of an excise costs a customer nearly €2.5 per bottle. The difference between then and now is a solid €1.5. That's a third of what the wine actually costs back home in Spain. And only then do we talk about VAT. Other taxes are calculated first and the VAT is slapped on top. This means the seller will bake the higher duties and excises into the price just to break even, and then another 20% will be added to that total as yet another tax. It's a tax on a tax. Indirect tax hikes essentially feed the VAT. But surely, at least local producers benefit from this? Oh, that's a great question. To put it in fancier terms, the government has created a very favourable external macro environment for local players. Look, duties only apply to foreign goods and, for unfriendly countries, they've doubled. Excises, on the other hand, on paper should hit everyone, local and foreign alike. But there's a catch. If the wine is made from Russian grapes, there's a special excise refund procedure. In other words, local producers not only skip the duties, but also barely feel the excise burden since a chunk of that cost is compensated. What's not to like if you're a local producer? That's why over half of them expect profits to climb, and more than 60% are planning to attract new investments, and this is in a war economy, currently pushed to its absolute limits. Credit where it's due, the government played this quite well. Since 2024, to get that refund, you have to sign an agreement with the Russian Ministry of Economic Development. With that, you promise that the tax rebates will be reinvested into local vineyards, spent on equipment, reconstruction and modernization. Sounds like a solid plan. As a result, local wineries are aiming to capture up to 80% of the entire Russian market. And honestly, that goal looks well within reach. Under the weight of these duties, imports are shrinking, and most of the wine on the shelves of Russian stores is now a national product. European imports are being pushed out by cheaper alternatives from countries not hit by double duties. Think Latin America, South Africa, and Georgia. And many Russians are increasingly settling for local labels. This is textbook protectionism, a strategy that's once again becoming a global economic trend. In the end, prices go up for local goods too, but domestic producers gain a competitive edge and a reason to grow. It's a clever, no-lose scenario for the state. By buying a bottle, you're either supporting a local business or, if the wine is imported, stuff the federal budget with at least 3 different taxes at once. A very different scenario elapsed over the last few years with a trendy new drug that is also a headache for legislators worldwide, the vape. This story gives us a perfect example of a phenomenon known in economics as the Laffer curve. It essentially says that there's a ceiling to an effective tax rate. Cross that line and instead of raking in more cash, you harm the economy and get the exact opposite effect. But first, let's be clear. Sugar, booze, and cigarettes are bad for you. A sin, if you will. But sins pay, and governments around the world refuse to ban it outright. Instead, they strike a deal with their conscience. They protect the public with higher prices while lining their own pockets to keep the lights on. As it often happens, technology advances faster than law could keep up. At first, Russian legislators didn't know what to tax. The device itself? The nicotine juice inside? Both? Businesses had one answer and customs had another. If you think the courts in your country are slow or useless, grab a seat. This will get interesting. The Russian Customs Service decided to retroactively slap importers with $60 million in extra taxes for vapes brought in over the previous 3 years. Imagine a tax collector showing up and saying, "Remember how I didn't have an issue with you before? Well, now I do. Pay up." Naturally, a legal war broke out, reaching all the way to the Supreme Court. It was pure chaos. At first, the court ruled in one case in favor of the importer, tossing the extra tax. But that didn't set a precedent because literally the next day, the very same judge issued the opposite ruling for a different importer, and the tax had to be paid.
Goodbye!
The Russian government had to step in and provide clearer guidelines. Here's what they came up with. There's the vape liquid, and there's the vape itself. The device is exempt from excise tax, only the liquid gets hit. After all, that's the harmful part, not the electronics. And to make up for the difference, let's hike the juice excise from 22 to 25 cents. The new rules are transparent and easy to follow. They put an end to retroactive customs bills and endless court battles. Everything's great. And just so you see how cynical this world really is, the Russian Ministry of Health actually spoke out against banning vapes, citing the fact that they plan to collect $45 million in excise taxes that year. Let that sink in. The Ministry of Health is against a vape ban because of the tax revenue. And then next year they double the excise, making it the highest in the entire Eurasian Economic Union. At that point, economists began issuing warnings that the entire market was about to go underground. Another new law hit the industry. Now the tax applied to a brand new legal concept, nicotine raw materials. This is the stuff used to make the juice that's already taxed. Essentially, the authorities decided to tax the very first link in the production chain, just to make absolutely sure they squeeze the juice out of the market to the max. And as an extra, they expanded the excise to include tobacco-free mixes too, similar to the logic used for sugar drinks and alcohol. For context, these are practically harmless mixtures with less than 1/100% of nicotine. But the masterminds in the Russian Duma decided that it's still a biologically active concentration worthy of, that's right, a sin tax. In a short few years, they took a new market, scaled up the existing taxes, and invented a whole stack of new ones. The Ministry of Finance was practically rubbing its hands together in anticipation of a massive windfall. The logic is simple. If people used to pay X billions in taxes and you double the tax rate, the state should get twice the revenue from the same sources. And if you expand the list of taxable goods, you might even triple it. But the constant tax hikes made running a legal business completely pointless. If you follow the rules and stay legal, the excise tax alone on a single bottle of vape liquid in Russia would be $16.50. Meanwhile, the actual retail price of that bottle is only around $8. Just try to wrap your head around that. One single tax is twice as high as the actual price of the product in the store. Just the excise. How is that even possible? Well, now let's see if the expectations ended up matching the reality. Compared to the forecasts, the production of vape liquids fell short by $1.2 million, a pocket change for the federal budget. But when it comes to imports, the drop is much more dramatic. They missed the mark there by $100 million. Now let's see how the state fared with the excise taxes on raw materials and nicotine-free mixes. $230 million less than expected. Want to guess the original target? $230 million. Just process that for a second. The total amount collected under this category was barely $4,000. It's a similar story with the tobacco-free mixes. They collected $550,000, falling short once again by, strangely enough, another $230 million. All in all, the total shortfall for the entire industry hit roughly $568 million. That's a massive sum, comparable to the annual budgets of several major Russian cities combined. Now, to be fair, a shortfall isn't a loss. It just means they planned to skim way more than they actually did. The new taxes on materials and non-nicotine liquids that for some reason businesses either chose not to or simply couldn't pay.
I guess we'll never know.
But the actual dip, the year-over-year decline, happened specifically with the vape liquids tax. It caused a sizable drop in production compared to last year and a total collapse in imports. The fact that out of 117 legal companies operating in the market, only 5 remain probably had something to do with it. That is a 23-fold drop in just 1 year. The rest, well, just evaporated. But probably the number of vape users dropped just as well. That would be a good thing, right? Well, it would be a good thing if it was true. And if at the same time the number of traditional smokers didn't increase, then yes, that would also be great. But we don't live in a fairyland, and the stats show the opposite. The number of vapers in Russia is only growing, even though the tax data suggests there should be a crash. A massive one, by more than 2 times. This example clearly shows that you can't always help the budget by simply hiking a tax. And it's not really about vapes. If this were happening in the market for, say, counterfeit Labubu dolls, we would be looking at that instead. So, what's the moral of the story? Since the war began, the Russian state has been hurting for some cash, and practically the only way to do that from within is to introduce a new tax. And they've looked everywhere. At the start of the conflict, they squeezed nearly $4 billion from several top corporations in one go, followed by over $12 billion from the country's largest oil producer. Now, to fund the war, they've started aggressively digging into the pockets of regular citizens. This shift happened because oil prices have seen a steady decline since 2022. Oil money is becoming harder and harder to come by for the budget, so the state switched its focus to the populace. Even though current events in the Middle East caused a brief spike in the price of black gold, those prices would need to hold for years to plug the massive hole in the budget. Today, we've covered only a fraction of the taxes that have cropped up in Russia during the war years. Not long ago, the state introduced a new car tax, nearly doubling the price for most models. For almost a year now, Russians have been giving up on buying cars, simply because they can no longer afford them. So, if you want to see a video about how Russia effectively banned its citizens from owning a decent car, leave a comment below. As for us, we'll see you in the next one. But before we go, we want to thank our patrons on Patreon. It's thanks to your support that we stay afloat and keep making new videos despite all the challenges. Join our community on Patreon for exclusive materials. Plus, one of our tiers will get access to unique, custom artwork based on our episodes, created specifically for you by a real artist. We'll be waiting for you, and thanks. And I'm the researcher.